How much time do you actually have left? Not in years, but in real, usable days you can shape, control, and remember. Because if you're honest, you don't experience life in decades. You experience it in ordinary days that quietly disappear. Let me make this real. If you're around 25 and you live to 80, you have about 55 years left. That sounds like a lot. But convert that into weeks, and it's roughly 2,800. That number already feels different. Now remove sleep. About a third of your life is gone immediately. You're left with around 1,900 waking weeks. Then factor in work, a full-time job, commuting, basic responsibilities. Suddenly, a large portion of those weeks is no longer yours to freely use. Now ask a better question. How many of those weeks are actually spent doing things that feel meaningful, intentional, and alive? For most people, that number is shockingly small. And that's a problem. You don't run out of time because life is short. You run out of time because most of it is spent on autopilot. I'm going to show you why that happens and how to redesign your life so your remaining time actually feels like yours. Chapter 1. The illusion of later. Your brain is wired to believe there's always more time. 50 years feels like an endless stretch, so you treat it that way. You delay decisions, postpone risks, and assume you can fix things later. But later is not a real place. It's a mental safety net. Every time you say, "I'll do it later," you're not moving something forward. You're compressing it into a smaller window. The life you imagine living one day has to fit into whatever time is left after years of delay. And that window is much smaller than you think. Chapter 2. Your life in weeks. There's a simple way to see this clearly. Imagine your entire life as a grid of small boxes, each one representing a week. From birth to around 80 years old, that's about 4,000 boxes. Now picture how many of those boxes are already filled. A significant portion is gone. Now mark the weeks you'll spend working, sleeping, and handling responsibilities. What remains is not decades of freedom. It's a limited number of flexible weeks scattered across your life. Seeing time like this removes the illusion. It forces you to confront something uncomfortable. Your life is finite, measurable, and constantly moving forward. Chapter 3. The autopilot problem. So why do people waste so much of this limited time? Because autopilot is easy. Your brain is designed to conserve energy. It prefers routines, habits, and familiar patterns. Once something becomes automatic, you stop questioning it. You wake up, go to work, scroll your phone, eat, repeat. Days blend together, weeks disappear. Years feel like they pass and fast forward. Think of it like driving on a highway with cruise control on. You're moving, but you're not really paying attention. You miss exits, you miss opportunities, and before you know it, you're far from where you intended to go. Most people don't actively choose their life. They drift into it. Chapter 4. The cost of good enough. Comfort doesn't feel dangerous, but it is. When your life is good enough, there's no urgency to change. Nothing feels broken, so you assume everything is fine. But the absence of pain is not the presence of meaning. You can spend years in situations that are stable but not aligned with what you actually want. A job that pays well but drains you. A routine that feels safe but uninspiring. Habits that are easy but keep you stuck. Individually, these don't seem like big problems, but over time, they compound into a life that feels empty, even if it looks successful from the outside. Chapter 5. Time compounds, whether you like it or not. Time is not neutral. It compounds. Small daily choices scale into massive long-term outcomes. If you waste 1 hour per day, that's more than 15 full days per year gone. Over 10 years, that's over 5 months of your life spent on something that likely didn't matter. Now flip it. If you invest 1 hour per day into something meaningful, your health, your skills, your relationships, the long-term effect is just as powerful, but in the opposite direction. The difference is not visible in a single day, but over time, it becomes impossible to ignore. Your life is not shaped by big decisions, it's shaped by repeated small ones. Chapter 6. Why awareness changes behavior. Most people avoid thinking about time like this because it's uncomfortable. It forces you to face trade-offs. If your time is limited, you can't do everything, which means every yes is also a no to something else. This is where control begins. When you truly understand how limited your time is, your standards change. You become more selective. You stop tolerating things that don't deserve your time. Not because you suddenly become more disciplined, but because you finally understand the cost. Chapter 7. Passive versus intentional living. There are two ways to live your life. Passive living means reacting. You follow default paths, accept standard routines, and let external factors decide how your time is spent. Intentional living means designing your life around what actually matters to you. Most people stay passive because it's easier in the short term. It requires less thinking and less risk, but it comes at the cost of long-term regret. And that regret rarely comes from what you did. It comes from what you never made time for. That's where we need to shift. Because once you see how little time you actually have, the goal is no longer to fill your days. The goal is to design them. And that's exactly what we're going to break down next. Chapter 8. Designing your time before it gets taken. Most people don't lose their time intentionally. They lose it by default. They wake up, react to messages, go through work, scroll in between, and by the end of the day, there's nothing left for what actually matters. Not because they didn't care, but because they never decided in advance. You need to reverse that. Treat your time like a limited resource that must be allocated before it gets consumed. Think of it like money. If you don't decide where it goes, it disappears on small, unplanned expenses. Your time works exactly the same way. Start with a simple rule. The most important parts of your life get scheduled first, not last. If something matters, it needs a place in your day before everything else takes over. Chapter 9. The structure that actually works. You don't need a complex system. You need a clear one. Use 3 layers. The first layer is non-negotiables. These are the things that improve your life long-term. Training, learning, building something, maintaining key relationships. These go into your schedule first, even if it's just one focused block per day. The second layer is responsibilities, work, chores, obligations. These are necessary, but they should not expand to fill all available time. The third layer is everything else. Entertainment, scrolling, passive activities. These are not the enemy, but they should only fill the remaining space. Most people live in reverse. They spend their best hours on low-value activities, then try to squeeze meaningful work into whatever is left. That approach guarantees average results. Flip it, and your life starts to shift quickly. Chapter 10. Making it stick. Understanding. This is not enough. You need to make it repeatable. The biggest mistake people make is relying on motivation. Motivation feels strong in the moment, but it fades fast. If your system depends on how you feel, it will break the first time you're tired, distracted, or stressed. So, you remove the need for motivation. Reduce friction for the things you want to do. Prepare your environment so starting is easy. Define the first step so there's no hesitation. At the same time, increase friction for the things that waste your time. Make them slightly harder to access. Not impossible, just inconvenient enough to interrupt the automatic behavior. Your environment should support your intentions, not fight them. Then, add one simple habit that keeps everything aligned. Once per week, take 20 minutes to review how you spent your time. What actually mattered? What took more time than it should have? What needs to change next week? This keeps you from drifting back into autopilot. It forces small corrections before they turn into years of misalignment. Now step back and look at the bigger picture. At some point, your weeks will run out. Not dramatically, but quietly, one after another, just like they always have. The question is not whether that will happen. The question is how you will have used them. You don't need to optimize every second, but you do need to be honest about where your time is going and whether that reflects the life you actually want. Because your life is not made up of years, it's made up of how you spent your days, and your days are made up of how you chose to use your time. So start small, but start deliberately. Take one part of your day, take control of it, and make it count. Then expand from there, because the time you have left is limited, but it is still enough to build something meaningful if you decide to use it that way.